You ready to offend some people?
Sure.
This here is the Coaching Life podcast, and it will be our last episode.
The last one that is viewed or listened to.
Yeah, speaking of viewed, let me throw just a little tangent here.
Okay.
But you think we should start doing? I had somebody ask me why we don't do video casting, a vodcast here in our studio, since we have such a nice studio.
Yeah, well, because I'm fat.
You'd have to shave.
Yeah. Like, well, man, way to attack me. I went to myself, and you came right at me. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, it's just not something we ever looked into.
We should experiment.
I know why. Because we edit sometimes.
Well, you say things that you shouldn't say sometimes.
Right.
That's not true. He's always clean and family friendly.
But have we edited less over the last? Yeah. We've edited. Yeah. I think it was.
I mean, all I pretty much do from here is go through and add the sound at the beginning and the end, and add the intro music and the outro music, but pretty much what we say is what you hear.
So what would we have though? Like, because then it would have to be YouTube, right?
No, there's actually a streaming option. There's a video streaming option inside of what used to be Anchor.fm, which is our platform that we use, and here we are giving them free advertising. But it was purchased by Spotify, so it's now the app is called Spotify for Podcasters, and part of their improvement, I guess you could say, or their upgrade. Anchor may have actually done this instead of Spotify. I don't know, but they added. There's an app called Zencastr that people will sometimes use that allows you to record a podcast with somebody from across the country. They don't have to be in the same studio, and you both sound the same. You're using equipment on your end, they're using equipment on their end, and we can both record, and it sounds like good professional studio quality. Anchor does that as well. You and I could do that as well, and we have done that. You just using our phones when you and I were in different locations. I think I was standing out at my nephew's baseball game one time, and I was speaking into my phone, you were speaking in yours. But they also have, Zencastr has a video option where you could see you on your end. You set up a camera, and I set up a camera, and then every time you speak, it goes to you, or it's split screen, and you could see it.
Gotcha. So that's how we'd handle guests.
Anchor has that now too. Yeah, Spotify for Podcasters has that option as well. So we could set up a camera in here. Mm-hmm. We'd have to have a person switch it back and forth if we just wanted to put like one on you, one on me, 2 cameras. But we could just set up one right there and just show us both, because we sit fairly close together. No.
Do you think people would really want to look at us as we talk?
I don't think so.
Either.
Yeah. I asked my class last week how many of you actually watch podcasts instead of, we were talking about different podcasts and experiences, and I think I only had one person out of 30 say that they actually watch their podcasts, and it had to do with the way they learn, like they retain information or retain it. And she just said it was her preference. So. And other people said they don't have time to do that. They listen to podcasts while they're walking, walking, mowing grass. That's what I do. That's me personally as well. Like, even if I'm listening, like Joe Rogan, all of his stuff, you don't have the option of not watching it. It shows up.
You just stick it in your pocket.
You do. Spotify has a thing that you can turn off that if you're on using data.
I do that on YouTube. It's like speeches and things like that on YouTube. I'll just
I mean, it's not something I don't watch podcasts. Right. I listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
And some people like that. So I don't know. We might experiment. I'll let you know ahead of time so you can get dressed up and stuff if you want.
Am I not wearing?
No, you look great. You're always wearing a Meg's baseball shirt. I'm sorry, you're wearing an OIT shirt, an OU shirt right now today since you're on campus.
I've got this time marked out on my schedule.
Oh yeah, it's our lunchtime. Do you eat lunch on this day? You and I used to eat lunch afterwards.
I know, then you stopped inviting me.
We take too long screwing around in here. We're like, I got to get back to work.
We'll get back to that someday, some point.
Yeah. Okay, back to the topic. Off the tangent. So we said something last week in our podcast about adolescence. You asked, we were talking about high school people, and you said, you called them kids. You're like, well, I don't know, what are they, kids? And I said, no, they're not. Mm-hmm. However, they are. But should they be? I guess maybe that's the question. So we thought we'd take some time.
Last week we said it matters what you say.
Yes.
So what do we really mean when we say they're kids?
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, it's just easy to let the word, hey kid, my kids, you're talking about my kids, my team, my kids, boy, you're talking in the newspaper and you're like, boy, the kids really stepped up and they believed in us. I heard a college coach say that about their football team this weekend, And so it kind of got me on a little bit of a short rant last week, and we thought we would turn it into a long rant today.
Right.
And what do we call this episode? What's it going to be titled? I guess by the time people listen to it, the title will already be there. But what was the title that I texted you?
Boys to Men.
Boys to Men. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. I got a couple other ideas for you.
We should open with the Boys to Men song.
We'd have to pay for that.
That's right.
Yeah. We can, yeah.
They should thank us for bringing them back to prime time.
Are they men yet?
I don't know.
Well, that's the question of the day. When do you become a man? And we're gonna let's just keep it at men. I mean, it could apply to girls and women as well. But
sure.
I mean, you and I should talk to the young men for a little bit. Let's talk to the young men today.
Okay.
And so here are a couple other topic or title Adidas. Here are a couple of
we're plugging everybody today.
Yeah, I guess so. Here are a couple of title ideas for today's podcast. One is just avoid adolescence. Avoid it.
Avoid it.
Hey kids, yeah, avoid it. Now, obviously, the question that insinuates is, well, how? Isn't it unavoidable? No, let's talk about that. Here's another idea. So you might like this one.
Okay.
Boys who can shave.
All right. You're catching me off guard with some of this stuff, but we'll see where it goes.
So what I mean by that is, look outside here. So that we have to describe the picture that we have for everybody. We have the campus green outside our window.
We're going to talk about the weather.
There are people walking around. A lot of them are students here at the Ohio University.
Right.
And right there, there's a young man walking by right there, right?
Mm-hmm. Kid.
Should be a man. See, is that a kid? Right? I mean, he's anywhere between 18 and 24, would you say? Okay. Yeah. And then there are people walking around on the green over there that are probably anywhere between 18, 24. Is that a kid or is that a man?
Do you want to answer that question?
That seems to be the question of the day, doesn't it? I mean, those people can all shave, I would assume. I mean, I didn't start growing facial hair till later in life. But by the time I was in college, I was at least trying to shave.
Yeah.
It didn't have any razors on it. I was just practicing.
I mean, I would consider them men. Yeah.
Certainly.
Right.
Me too. What about your high school baseball team, those players? You got so now you're talking 14 years old to 18 years old.
I think.
Do you refer to some of them as kids and some of them as men?
No.
Yeah.
No. And normally when I'm addressing them, I never refer to any of them as kids that I can think of.
Yeah, me either.
And I may have.
I mean, I shouldn't say never.
Yeah, that's why one might have slipped. Yeah. I'm trying to think when I've talked to reporters and things like that.
Our intention.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is to not refer to them as kids.
Yeah. Because I'm asking, I want them to be responsible. So I want to talk to them with responsible terms.
Yep.
I guess is what I'm saying. So I would say that sometimes I would use the term kid as a term of endearment.
I get what you're saying. Or I'll let you tell me what you're saying, then I'll see if I'm on the same track.
What's up, kid?
Yeah.
I
kind of thought you were thinking, sometimes I feel like their father.
Oh,
because God refers to all of us as children, His children, right? We're His children.
Yeah.
And so there's a familial feel of being a kid, right? Like you're my kids. Like I look at all of you as my kids. Mm-hmm. And like I still have kids But my
and I
kids
guess
are adults.
Yeah, true. I guess kid isn't really a part of the conversation because you can be a kid without. You can be a man and still be a kid.
Yeah, I guess
like child.
what we're referring to is son or daughter, right? Like
right.
you're looking at your players as sons, and so when you think of your children, when you think of your sons, you think of your children,
Right.
Right, and so you use so we have a word that we use interchangeably.
Yes.
That means the same thing as a son or a daughter, but that word is children.
Yeah.
But that word also means something in terms of your maturity.
Mm-hmm. I think that's where,
And that's where we're at.
And when it comes down to context is when when these words are being used and when they're not being used. I think, and that's what we're probably going to talk about mostly today.
Sure, because I would agree with you that there's certainly nothing wrong with referring to them as your kids, right? Like
Sure.
Hey kid, like a term of endearment, in the same way that you would refer to your, if I happen to see my son who is 24 years old walking down the street, hey kid, how you doing?
Yeah,
right?
right.
I mean, that's my kid, right? And he understands that. He also just bought a house,
Right.
and he's working a full-time job. He has a child and he's married. That's an adult, right? And so I think for the sake of this conversation, we need to separate. We're not talking about people that you're referring to as your family, whether they're your family or not, blood-born family. We're talking about your maturity.
Yeah.
When do you need to start seeing yourself as a man?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Tough question.
It is. It is. And it's going to, when we say, we're going to offend people, we probably will. There will be people who disagree with this.
Sure.
And there will be people who will say, and there will be different reasons why people disagree. And a lot of it has to do with just we've bought what the culture has fed us for years, I believe. Yeah. I mean, because you go back in history, I think, like I said, we could call this avoid adolescence. And you're
Right.
like, what? How is that even possible, right? Well, is it? I say it.
You mean as opposed to embrace it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. As opposed to embrace it.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about it. We've times have changed, and I think everybody would agree with that. And we may, we may come to a point where.
Have they changed for the better?
Well, I would say in some cases yes, and in some cases no. And what we're talking about here today, if you think about in the I don't know the early 1900s, what was a kids what was a, let's say, heck, 8-year-old to 16-year-old's life like in the early 1900s as compared to what they're like today, and how did people refer to those individuals at that period in contrast to how they refer to them today? How did they manage them? How did they teach them? How did they see them? A lot different.
Remember when we talked about the book, Jonathan Haidt is the author, The Coddling of the American Mind?
Yes.
And we told the story of how he, living in New York City, he and his wife allows his 8-year-old son, or he did back when the son was 8 years old, to go 1 block away, leave his apartment, go 1 block away to the supermarket or little store and buy some candy or something and come back home without worrying about him. I mean, I'm sure they're worried.
Sure,
I mean, because we're parents, it's natural, but allowed him to take that stuff as an 8-year-old kid.
You don't know how much pain that book has caused me over the past few years.
I know. I go back to it. It's challenging. It is challenging.
We let Maya go jet ski riding with his teenage buddies the other day.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Is Jeremiah a teenager yet?
He is now. He wasn't then.
He just turned 13?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not wondering whether he just turned 13. I was trying to think whether he went before or after he turned 13. I think he went before, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, he went and ride jet skis on the Ohio River with his buddies. I don't think I would have let him do that. I don't think I would let Jake do that when he was 12.
Okay.
Oddly enough.
So would you consider that a point of growth for you and Chastity as parents?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think so.
I mean, there might be somebody listening who would say, I'd say as a point of foolishness.
Yeah. Well, I tell you this, the one thing, I was afraid. I was concerned. But the one thing that I'm afraid of more than anything is raising our kids to be afraid of life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've read studies on this, and I've listened to people talk, and I'm sure there's counterpoints, but, you know, the more that we try to shield our kids from things, you know, the harder it is for them to learn.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, and here's where it comes in, isn't it? Here's where the phrase comes in. But he's just a kid.
I know.
Why does he need to learn that stuff? You know.
And it's not.
So it's time.
Well, here we are in the middle of a podcast, and my son Brock is calling me. I forgot to put it on the vibrate.
Go ahead and talk to him.
Should I talk to him?
Yeah.
Hey, Pat and I are podcasting, but I went ahead and answered it anyway, just in case you need something.
Oh, okay. No, I just asked if you're at that.
Where were we?
You're not suggesting that because you and Chastity allowed Jeremiah to do that everyone should do the same necessarily. Or maybe you're suggesting that, or do the same things. Like where you may not draw the line at going jet skiing, somebody else might draw a line there.
Sure, right.
At that, but they may let their kids do other things. Like I get it that there's some comfort levels based on, you know, your son, and he can swim, and you have to have discernment based on.
Discernment's a good word. Yeah.
Based on the wisdom or foolishness of your kids.
Although some people would think that is careless.
Sure.
You know.
Sure. Yeah. I would argue. I think you and I would both argue with them about that.
Sure.
That just because you see it as careless doesn't mean that it is.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think, you know, when we talk about adolescence, it is a fairly new concept. It is a 20th century concept.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Talk
not
about that a little bit.
Yeah, it is. You know, historically and traditionally, a guy would go through two phases: boy, man, boy to man. You become boys to men. There was no middle ground of this thing that we have called adolescence. I think adolescence was created. Well, it was created to allow us to stay in this perpetual childhood for as long as, and no one knows where it ends anymore. No one knows where it ends. And so historically, if you look back, you know, we often refer to historically, you can look at the history of the Bible and see examples of this, but not just the Bible, any culture in history, you can look and see this. In some cultures still today, you can see this. There are 5 sociological variables that sort of click for a boy at some point that turns him into a man. And it's often, like it was often simultaneous and sometimes quick, but once it started happening, they started happening. I'll just go through, I'll tell you what they are.
Okay.
All right. You leave your parents' home. I mean, that Genesis 2 talks about that, right? A man's going to leave his father and mother. Well, when is that? It's pretty young for guys back then.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
You know, in some cases, we're talking 12, 13 years old.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one variable. 2, you finish your education or your vocational training.
Okay.
That also concluded a lot earlier. Right.
That's true.
Okay. Because they began from the time they're very young, you know, learning the trade or learning the things that they needed to learn.
They were doing that job when they were 10 years old, even younger than that.
So then, number 3, you start your career. And I said career. You start a career track job, not some dead end job, right? You actually have a trade. You know what you're doing. Number 4, you meet a woman. And you may meet many, right? But at some point, you meet the person that she's in agreement as well. You guys want to be a marital couple.
Also used to happen a lot.
And also used to happen a lot earlier. Absolutely. We know that Mary, who carried Jesus, was possibly as young as 13 years old, right? And that's not pedophilia. That was just culture. I mean, that's just yeah, she was not the reason why the reason why our laws came up with, and listen, this is sticky, right? Like, I'm not suggesting, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I hope everyone realizes out there.
Absolutely. but we have to call it pedophilia because they're children. They're children, right? They weren't considered children.
Right.
They were men and women. We've created a longer childhood in our culture, and so yes, they are there is an innocence there. There is a people. I know people will get on and say, biologically, there's reasons why you shouldn't, this or that. I get that. We're talking about emotional maturity. Matching as you become physically mature as well. It doesn't match still. People are not emotionally mature enough to be an adult by the time they reach puberty in today's world.
Right.
And they should be. That's what we're saying. They should be. Yeah.
But why aren't they?
Where did I leave off? 4. The 5th one is this: you have children.
Oh, I thought there was 4.
The 4th one is you get married, and 5 is you have children.
Gotcha.
And it all happened a lot earlier than all of these things would click sociologically throughout, historically. And we're not talking that long ago. Right? I mean, we're talking.
No.
We're not, because you even mentioned back in the 20s and 30s how what was that person's life like? A lot different than ours. We've talked about, in biblical days, like we said, you could be as young as 12, 13, married, and people were like, "Wow, that is just too young." Okay.
Even much later than that, you could I'm thinking in the 1800s that was
right
prominent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, who's the guy? The midshipman, David Farragut, the United States Navy's the Navy's first admiral, became a midshipman on the warship, the Essex, at age of 10. Age of 10, he was a midshipman. Yeah, he worked on the ship as a 10-year-old. At the age of 12, which would be still a boy, we're talking Maya's age.
Right.
He's younger than Maya, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was given command of his first ship. Sailing the vessel.
Wow.
At 12.
Isn't that something?
And this guy eventually becomes an admiral. His name is David Farragut, United States Navy admiral. He's the first admiral.
I bet.
And he started in that career at the age of 10.
That's something else.
And it seems so bizarre to us. Like people's listening ears right now are going, "That is nuts." Is it?
He was successful. Right. So why is it nuts? Because, we think about, I think we associate that maturity with preparedness, right? And a lot of times when we are using that phrase, or when we're saying, they're kids, or, they're not ready, or, whatever it is, whatever conversation we're having, we're making excuses.
Yes.
And that's what I think we need to steer away from, because what was his name? Admiral
David Farragut.
Farragut,
yeah.
Farragut.
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 The United States Navy first admiral.
They didn't make any excuses for him.
No.
Right?
Right. He wasn't just a kid.
Go run the ship.
He belonged.
Yeah.
He showed in a couple of years.
But how do you get there? You know what I mean? How do you get to that point? And I think that's part of the fear that I have, is by limiting our kids, by using that that reasoning of, well, they're too young to experience this, or they're just kids, or whatever it is that we say, we're not allowing them to be prepared. And I think we see it a lot of times, with bad behavior.
Yes.
That's
speaking of the college campus, right? And I don't want to just pick on college kids, but you see it.
It happens a lot, especially with athletes.
Yeah, you look around, you see, it's just anyone. I mean, come over here on a Thursday night. Walk around,
right.
or a weekend, I mean, it's this, and it's excuses are made for it. And the excuse is, it's this third life stage that we've created called adolescence. It's somewhere in the middle between boy and man, and we don't know what to call it. And so we just call it guys. right?
Yeah.
You're not a boy, you're not a man, you're just a guy. You're in this stage of adolescence that starts somewhere in the teen years, and it just continues on to it's infinite.
But why do
right?
we do it? Do we do it because we don't like to have the conversation about
Right? I don't know.
about responsibility, about duty?
Well, it's really easy to. I mean, as soon as you put an age of responsibility on someone, and they haven't met that, now there's guilt. You don't have to be guilty. I mean, I could be 28 years old and still acting like a kid. And listen, this isn't just an adolescent thing. I'm talking about it continue. The same concept is midlife crisis.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
it's true.
Isn't it the same concept? I'm having a midlife crisis. Well, no, it's the same boy. You just traded your tricycle in for a Harley. That's the difference, right? I mean, it's the same. It's the same mode of transportation. It's the same idea. It's the same idea. And what kills young men is the acceptance of adolescence, which is this indefinite period of boyhood that feels natural to us, and feels like it's unavoidable. Like, well, it's just what we have. It's just who we are. It's just the culture that we live in. But does it have to be?
Absolutely not. Right. That just seems like almost a quitter's response, right?
Yes.
There's nothing I can do. A victim, so to speak. You know, this is where I'm at, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that goes against, I would think, any coach's philosophy is, you know, in relationship to their players, because we think every day is an opportunity to get better, to do something. And, you know, if we're saying there's nothing we can do about it, then we're saying we can't do that.
Yeah.
Which, that's not good. That's not good mentality for an athlete. It's not a good mentality for a person. You know, and if there is something you can do about it, then you can't just speak it away that way.
Right.
You can do something about it. What can we do about it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we're here. Let me give you a little more information on David Farragut here,
Okay.
right? He was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. When he was 11 years old, he served in the War of 1812 under the command of his adoptive father. But I mean, okay, so anyway, we're talking about the 19th century, right?
Right.
And we're like, well, this is normal. This is normal today. This is the way it is. I mean, we can't change it. But somewhere along the way, we did change it, because it up until the 20th century, it wasn't the norm. Mm-hmm. The norm was what Admiral David Farragut was doing.
Yeah.
The norm was what George Washington was doing, right? Well, I mean, there's another young example.
But
right?
what's the Robert Schuller?
Yeah.
That says tough times don't last.
Oh yeah.
Tough people do. I can't remember who says the quote. What's it? Tough times make strong people.
Yeah, we did an entire podcast on that during COVID. It was actually one of our biggest downloaded
On Robert
podcasts. Did he write the book "Tough Times Don't Last, Tough People Do"?
Yes.
Yeah, we did. If you look back, I'll look back and see if I can find it.
It's like tough times make strong people make good times make weak people. Weak people make tough times.
Yeah, I don't know who did that
And
quote.
I'm wondering if we're in that, that's part of the cycle, because, we've, from the 19th century, or the 20th century, actually, the early 1900s to now, we've advanced quite a bit, and we've lived in some pretty good times. I mean, obviously we went through the world wars and in the early to mid 1900s, but from that point forward, we've continued to pretty much expand. But if you think about, just think about, you've been to the Dominican. And you've seen.
I've been to Honduras. Yeah, my wife went to the Dominican.
Okay, and those people are living in some pretty tough situations down there.
Extremely.
Yeah, and I would say that, and I've never been down there.
Something that nobody in our listening audience would ever fathom of living in a circumstance like that.
Would you say that they look at
cardboard home, pretty much?
Yeah. Would you say that they look at their kids very much in the same way that we're talking about kids were seen in the 1800s, 1700s?
Yes.
In the past.
I would, because I saw that. I saw little 8-year-old kids out with a machete, chopping down coconuts and things like that, and chopping trees and woods and
to survive.
To bring back firewood.
It was responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, I was shocked at the people who was offering help to us. We were digging trenches and putting electricity in, and like I said, okay, let this. We got labor laws in the United States. It's okay, let this little 10-year-old kid help me. And they're like, yeah, man, that's why he's here.
He was standing there thinking, these idiots have no idea what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but yeah, you're right. It's a change of, it's a paradigm shift in our minds. I mean,
and I think it might be brought on by a certain level of comfort.
Yeah.
Maybe, and I don't, laziness is the wrong word, but content, I would say, in the fact that, how she's just a kid. Just let it go. We can deal with it some other time. We can deal with that.
We've got plenty of time.
Yeah.
They're still a kid. There's this, and what we're doing is we're embracing that middle thing, that middle phase of life, that adolescent phase, that we're not sure how long it goes. So the question would be, okay, how much time? Like how long do you wait before you teach that responsibility?
Right. And why? Why would you wait?
Sure.
To start teaching that responsibility?
And maybe that's what we're saying is there's nothing wrong with challenging kids to grow up early. There really isn't. And I still, and we're not saying that they can't have fun and do things. Like, I still enjoy baseball like a little boy.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? Because it's a boy's game. It's a kid's game. And we're not against adults playing it because, one, they're making a living doing that. And so they've got their career job. They've grown up, and that's what they're doing. You and I coach it for that same reason, because it's not just a game that we're coaching, but it's lives. And so we're hoping to instill these very things and these very principles that we're talking about today in those young men that we coach. And we're not saying you can't enjoy things that a child would enjoy. You can't have fun as an adult and enjoy things that a child would enjoy.
Absolutely not.
If you are responsible and you take responsibility and you recognize that I do need to continue to grow up. I need to put childish ways behind me. A very wise person once said that, when I became a man, I put childish things behind me, right? And how old was the Apostle Paul when he said that? Not very old.
I don't know.
We think that, yeah, I mean, well, how old was he referring to? I mean, he may have been 30 years old when he said it.
Oh, okay.
But how old was he referring to, right? I mean, we don't know. I mean, like you said, we don't know. But my guess is, based on their culture, he was talking about very early, sometime in those teen years. But our problem is when we try to even define, like if I ask people to write us maybe we should do a question, because you can do a little survey question on your podcast now through Spotify. Maybe I should do a question that says, what is adolescence? And just let people answer it. Like, when do I grow up and become a man? Like, when does adolescence end? And we don't even know how to answer that in our culture. Like, is it 16 when we can drive? Are you a man now? Is it 18 when you can vote and enter the service? Are you a man now? Or is it 21? You can't drink till you're 21, so maybe you're not a man until you're 21. Or is it after you graduate college? Or is it after you get married? Or is it after you've had kids? Or is it after you buy a home? Like, we really don't know how to define when you are a man. When are you a man?
I don't think we've tried to. I think it's a slippery slope based on the situation. So we apply it when we want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at 18 years old, you could go to war.
Right.
Where everyone accepts that fact.
Yeah.
So at 18, are they men? But, every day you have this conversation comes up in college sports where a player will do something stupid.
Yeah.
And an analyst will say, well, just a kid. They're still kids.
I know. And I cringe every time I hear that, to be quite honest. I do. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, no, they're not.
Yeah.
They're not just a kid. People will say that about criticizing them, criticizing their play. Remember that coach? I'm a man. I'm 40. Remember that? Who was it that said that?
I can't remember.
Right? Don't criticize them. Criticize me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Yeah.
You turned 40. That's what makes you a man. Or you're their coach. That's what makes you. They're just kids, right? Your players are just kids. We shouldn't criticize their play or their behavior on the field because they're just kids.
I don't remember the context of that.
The context was, I think they were ripping his quarterback for having a poor game, and he got, or maybe the whole team. I don't remember, but it was something. I believe that was the context.
Interesting. Okay, well, I do remember that.
It was pretty funny. It created a lot of entertainment for radio shows.
A lot of memes out there.
Yeah. But it's a tough question. I mean, it's a tough question.
Why do we care? That might be a good thing. Why do we care? I mean, we talked a little bit about, why what I'm afraid of. My kid's not prepared for life as he ages. Right, I say that. So why do people care? Well, I guess another thing would be, why do people not care?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess we go back.
Why would you not want to enter into the argument of, let's help them mature earlier? I think sometimes we as parents are at fault for not ever wanting our kids to grow up. And I get that. I've got a little grandchild, that I've gotten to spend a lot of time with here lately, and it's every time she does something new, we're like, oh, she's growing up too fast, right? Yeah. And we kind of get in this mindset of, can't we just keep them kids for a little bit longer? And I understand that.
You think there's some selfishness to that too?
I do,
because what happens is our kids get older. So do we.
Yeah, that's true. It makes us feel a lot older when they're getting older. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe. Did you ever hear the, I'm sure you have, because it's been in a bunch of newsletters and things like that. I don't know. It was, I don't know how to, it was Coach Skolanos. Is that it? Used to coach for Cal Poly.
What sport?
Baseball.
Baseball?
Yep. So he was giving he retired from college coaching at 78 years old, and he went up to the stage and he was giving a speech of, telling everyone bye and all that. But he had a home plate hanging on his neck.
The 17 inches?
17
speech.
inches. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. So he said, how many inches, or how wide is his home plate?
Yeah.
And some people raised their hand and said 17 inches. And he said, "What do I have any Little League coaches?" Little League being 12U.
Yeah.
In the stands. I said, how wide is the plate that you play with? They said 17 inches, and then it continued to go.
Yeah.
Babe Ruth, which is a little bit older league. What about you guys? They say 17 inches. High school coaches, how wide is the plate in high school? 17 inches. How wide is the plate in college? 17 inches. Major League Baseball, what's the plate size in Major League Baseball? 17 inches. And
it's a good thing you didn't use bases.
That's true. That's a good. What in the world? What a horror! That Major League Baseball. They just ruined it. Coach Detweiler, I hope you're listening to that. You rule lover. You ruined this guy's point. But
I'm sorry. The plate, however, is still 17.
The plate's still 17 inches, and he asked, what happens when a pitcher gets to the major leagues and he can't throw a strike over the 17-inch plate? What do? Do they expand the plate for him? And of course, everyone laughs. But that's kind of the mentality that we take when we're not putting that duty and responsibility and understanding that in life you have to live up to a certain standard.
Yeah.
And we can just use that standard as an adult. As an adult, you have to behave a certain way, and it's always going to be that way. There's never going to be exceptions to that. So you might as well begin trying to hit that mark right now. We might as well begin teaching our kids, our children, however long that you want to call them that, how to live as adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we say, well, they're just kids, it's because we're not quite ready to make that commitment to say, I need to teach you.
It's going to require something of us.
Absolutely, it does. It does.
It does. Yeah. Well, and to go back to your question, why do we care? Why do we care? Why do we two guys who do a podcast supposedly about coaching, right? Why do we care about how long a person is in this perpetual childhood, what adolescence is or isn't, because everything's linked together.
Yep.
Everything in life is linked together. And so the longer we allow people to just remain children, the harder it is to help them be adults and to behave as adults, to play the games that we love as adults, right? To understand their responsibility. It's why kids have a hard time understanding the concept of, I want to accomplish this goal, and in order to accomplish this goal, there are some habits that I must engage in on a daily basis, often, right? Certainly a weekly basis, monthly, but just on a basis, in order to meet that goal. And if I do not engage in those habits, I will not meet that goal, and it will be my fault.
Right. And behavior that you want to stay away from.
Yes. Yeah. Things I need to do and things I need to stop doing.
Right.
Yeah. And that is a mature choice to be able to do that. We need kids, young men, to be able to make those choices in their teenage years to help them be as successful as they want to be, But we can't just say, they're just kids. They don't need to go to the weight room.
Right.
They're just kids. They're just kids. Let them be kids, right? Why are we working them so hard? It's because they told us they got a goal. And our job is to help them meet their goal. And this is what we know what it requires to meet that goal. And so they're going to have to make some different choices.
And not only that, but if you, as a coach out there, I would definitely say as a high school coach, but even any age coach, if you don't think it's important the way that your players behave when they're off the field, you don't think that has a direct impact on your team and the success that your team has, I think you're being quite naive.
Extremely naive.
It's something that you need to look into.
For sure.
And students should know that.
Yeah.
That the way that you behave, who you are as a person, if you act like a child, that very well could impact the way your coach sees you. And when there's a situation,
you will receive the consequences that a child would receive.
Yeah, right. And you will lack the trust, right? If there's a situation when a coach needs something to be done, and he looks to the bench and he's got an individual that behaves like a child, and makes excuses,
and he needs someone to do a man's job.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Who's he going to pick? Based on the behavior. Well, what do you think? It's not rocket science. It's not a hard decision. So, these are the types of things that you think about when, you read these books when they say it's not just about, how well you do in the game. It's not just about, if you go 3 for 3 or you have 18 strikeouts or things like that as a parent. Make sure you're teaching your kid the important parts of being a teammate, being an athlete, being a competitor, being a good person, because those things reflect upon your production and the opportunities that you get as you get older to do those things.
Yeah. And it's the reason why this is the same reason we talk about these things on this podcast, for the same reason that we coach, because this is linked to, sometimes we'll come in, that's why it's called the coaching life. Is it the coaching life or is it the coaching life? The answer is yes. Sometimes we talk about coaching things that deal more to do with the games that we play. Sometimes we talk about more about life things. But it all inevitably ends up being a life thing. But
absolutely.
Sometimes the life thing is so big that the emphasis needs to be placed on that. And today's emphasis is a little bit more on this aspect of life that we just happened to mention it last week, and so it became a bigger topic to talk about at that time.
It would be interesting to know how many people out there agree with some of the things that we're saying, or don't agree with what we're saying. But
yeah, I'm always interested in that, and I always care, but I don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
And we should all feel that way. Like you should form your opinions about things, and you should care when someone disagrees, care enough to say, well, maybe I could be wrong about some aspects of this, and I'm willing to hear that and willing to consider that as well. But at the same time, you also have to be you got to be convinced and confident in the things that you do believe, and say, it doesn't matter where somebody else stands. I am still going to raise my children this way, and it's okay.
Well, and I think the easy thing to say is, well, the reason that we say, as a society, we say, well, they're just kids and we make excuses for them is because we love them and we empathize with them. But I would say that's the exact reason why I'm afraid to overdo that. Because I love them, and I want them to be successful in life. And I know oftentimes removing discomfort from them is not the pathway to get them there. Yeah. So, what do you do? It's not easy. It's not easy, but just my thought on that. So.
You referred to one of our early podcast episodes, and I think it would be worth it to just recommend it because it is linked to what we're saying here. It's not necessarily about children and adolescents, but it's just about getting tougher.
I love this.
We referred to two of them. The one you referred to was episode 74, Tough Times, Tougher People. And this was really off, we recorded this in November of 2020. And so it was off of almost an entire year, several months, 5-6 months or so of dealing with all of the issues that came with COVID. And that was a pretty special episode, if I remember right, in terms of, we read the
excerpt from
the book, and the other one that we mentioned here today was the book, The Coddling of the American Mind. And I don't remember exactly what we titled that particular podcast, but if we find what that episode was, we'll link to it in the show notes. That way, if you can find it, maybe you can mention it, but either way, we can link to it in the show notes. Because I can't remember if we did that before or after, if that was an early days one or. I mean, it feels November of 2020.
I feel like we were in here. I feel like we were in studio when we did it, actually.
Yeah, I do too.
I can't remember when, but
yeah,
that was a great. The letting the kid walk down the New York City side to go get bread, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yep.
Yeah.
That'd be. I like I said, I think of that often when I go to.
All right.
When I go to make decisions, on what my kid can and cannot do.
Yeah.
Or kids, I should say. But I think something else changes you as a parent a little bit. That's when one of your sons or daughters get their license.
Yes. You're right. You're right.
I think you realize quite quickly how silly some of the concerns that you had in the past were.
That's true. You're kind of forced into that realization, aren't you?
Yep. And Coach, I think this is a really good point to make. Because the idea of a kid or a person being a kid and not really being prepared to respond to life around them. It kind of means or insinuates that person doesn't know all they need to know about life. Mm-hmm. But you know what? None of us ever get to that point, right? We're always learning.
Yeah.
We're never going to get to a spot where we've learned all we can learn in the roles that we're in. Our roles change on a dime sometimes, just overnight, and we've talked about this before, how, like myself, I was a boy, then I became a man, and during that time I was a high school, well, I would like to think sometime in high school.
Yeah, there you go.
But, I went from being a man high school student to a man college student, and I went from being a college student to a single adult. Right?
Yeah.
And then I became a husband.
Yeah.
And then I became a husband, father, husband, employee. You're always learning. So
you hit all 5 of those sociological things that I read earlier, right?
Right. I made it. I arrived. But what my point is, there was never a moment where I was like, okay, I know I need to know about being a man. Now I can focus on being, a data analyst. It was an early job. It's not like that, because you're not just your roles combine, and you got to learn how to be all those things at once. And it's just you never stop learning.
Yes,
and that kind of goes back to that victim statement of I've done all I can do. If you've done all you can do, I'll be honest with you, you're probably not here anymore.
Yeah.
That's the end game, you know. But if you're still here, there's still things you can grow in. There's still things you can do. So I hope that encourages everyone out there to.
I found the other episode.
Okay, good deal. What is it?
And I found it because I remembered what we titled it. It was titled "World's Worst Mom." Episode 102.
We tried to draw them in. Didn't we?
World's Worst Mom, and the topic of the conversation was safetyism, because that's what the book Coddling of the American Mind is about.
Yes.
And we opened up with a couple of different stories, and I believe the world's worst mom story was the one about how people referred to his wife as the world's worst mom because she lets her son go to the grocery store in the middle of New York City.
That's good stuff.
He's an 8-year-old, so yeah.
Didn't you mention in that didn't we talk about how, like in China, the people put their kids on the motorcycle and drive down through town?
Yeah. Like what is it? It's one of the cold countries, like Sweden or somewhere, where they put their babies outside in the cold to acclimate them to the cold. Have you ever read about that?
No.
Like 3 hours, and I mean, just put them out in the freezing cold just to get their bodies acclimated early to the cold temperatures. You should read about that. Like, it's in the Netherlands or somewhere where it's cold most of the time. It's incredible.
But that's, that does sound very crazy. Like
it does sound crazy.
One, I hate cold weather, so I can't imagine. But
there's a reason for it. The kids aren't dying from it.
No. And have you seen like babies that can swim, like newborn babies that know how to swim?
The people who just toss them in.
They just toss them in. I know. It's like,
I joked about that this summer. They're like, we probably had Palmer in the pool, and I said, so I just throw her in. She'll swim. And my grandmother, so it'd be Palmer's great-great-grandmother, right? Brock's great-grandmother. She was like, no, don't you dare. The fifth generation, okay, the matriarch says, no, we cannot do this. We're not doing it.
Well, that's another.
And they weren't going to do it. But I joke about that, but it's like, people do that.
They did.
I mean,
that's another phenomenon too that it would be good for probably not for the Coaching Life podcast, but for a sociology podcast out there. Your grandmother probably didn't have that insight when she was dealing with her kids.
She probably did throw her kids in there.
Yes, but as it gets down as we get down generations, they become more protective.
You become a little more protective. You do. That's for sure.
Shoot. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed our conversation today.
Or even if you didn't enjoy it, we hope that it was useful and you were challenged, maybe.
Yeah,
we all need to be challenged.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But maybe you feel more comfortable in your opinion of this now.
That's right.
It's okay to be wrong.
It's okay. You talking to me?
No.
You talking to them?
Them. See you, everyone.